Did you just get PCS orders to Dover Air Force Base here in lovely Delaware? And now you're wondering and trying to answer that age-old question, should I live on base or off base? In this video, I'm actually gonna go over some of the pros and cons of living both on base and off base. And some of them you just won't believe. But what I can promise you is after you watch the video, you'll definitely be able to make a more informed decision on whether or not to live on base or off base while you're here at Dover Air Force Base. If this is your first time watching my channel, welcome. My name is Windom. I help people buy and sell homes here in Delaware. I've lived here my entire life, and on this channel, I'll go over exactly what it's like living here in the first state, Delaware. And if you're thinking about potentially buying or selling here in Delaware, I'd love to have a conversation to see if it made sense for us to potentially work together. So I actually put all my info here up on screen now, and then I'll do it again in the descriptions down below. So let's start off with the pros of living on base. So the first thing is convenience. I mean, it's easy. You don't have to do anything at all. You don't have to do any research. Is it close to base? Is it far from base? Is it safe? How much does it cost? Etc., etc. You don't have to do any of that. All you got to do is contact the housing office. You call them up and say, hey, I'm gonna be there in a couple months. I need a place to stay. Can you hook me up? And also, you kind of don't have to worry about much. Everything is pretty much done for you automatically. So if you're younger and you've never lived on your own, it's kind of like living with training wheels. You don't have to worry about how to pay my rent or what I need to do. All that's just automatically taken out of your BAH. The second pro is security. I mean, if you're living on base, you're basically living in a gated community with 24/7 manned security. So no one's going to be able to get on base without the appropriate credentials. So you really don't have to worry about security as much. And because base housing is pretty much just an extension of the base, people tend to be on their best behavior while on base housing. And if there is some sort of issue because they have security there 24/7, if anything arises, it's taken care of pretty quickly. And the third pro are the amenities. I mean, there's basically a little ecosystem right there on base housing. I mean, it's going to have everything you need. So you're going to have a store for food. You're going to have a gym if you're trying to get jacked. If you want to go work on your golf swing, there's a golf course. If you have kids, there's parks, pool, and even a school right there on base housing. So if you're in one of those career fields where maybe you're pulling Panama shift or you're just trying to get that new promotion, so you're burning the candles on both ends and you really just don't want to be bothered and you're looking for that convenience, you could potentially just never leave base at all because you have everything you need. Now, why I don't recommend that, because I think you should get out and explore everything that Dover has to offer and its surrounding area. If you wanted to, you could. So the fourth pro that we have is definitely the community. I mean, everyone that's going to be living on base is probably going to be a service member or some type of military connection or retiree or something. They're going to have some sort of military affiliation for the most part. So with that being said, it's kind of a little village where everyone looks out for one another. I mean, if you need anything, whether it's advice or looking for a specific service, or if it's just borrowing a cup of sugar, everyone's willing to help just because they know what you're going through, either being active duty themselves or a spouse or whatever the case may be. Now, let's hop into the cons of living on base. You know how I said that whole community thing being good? It can also be a bad thing, so it's kind of a double-edged sword. Dover Air Force Base is extremely small. So chances are when you are living on base, your neighbor could potentially be a coworker, or maybe even a supervisor, or someone who has a mutual friend or acquaintance that knows you and who you are. So whether it's having that 8 a.m. beer while cutting the grass, or potentially forgetting to use your turn signal when leaving, chances are you could potentially hear about that later on. So sometimes it can kind of feel like you're still at work or you're still on the clock. You always got to watch what you're doing and you can never really relax. The second con could be there's a long waiting list in order to even get your home here on Dover Air Force Base. With everything going on in the last couple of years with housing shortages as well as longer building times for homes, sometimes we see there's a bit of a waiting list to actually get a home here. And as we all know, you're already on a deadline with report no later than dates, and it may not be the best situation to be in because you typically want your housing figured out before you have to report to your duty station. So the third con is that you don't actually get to choose the house that you live in. You say, while it's convenient, you say, hey, I need a home. They say, okay, we're going to do just that. We're going to give you a home, but you don't really have any say in it. You don't get to say the layout of the home, or hey, I want to be on the cul-de-sac, or hey, I want to be on the corner. You don't really get that opportunity to choose. They say, hey, this is what we got, and you got two options. You can either take it or you can leave it, and that's pretty much it. The fourth con is actually the quality of the homes. Now, This is kind of a mixed bag, hit or miss situation. On one hand, I've heard absolute horror stories such as mold, rodent infestations, long wait times for repairs, broken pipes, being overcharged, just a lot of different things. But on the other hand, I've also had clients who said they had a great experience there. They just decided to move off base because they wanted to either just get more space, or they wanted to actually start investing and actually using some of that money to buy a home. The fifth con, and honestly the biggest one to me, is that you don't get to keep your BAH. Because if the military is providing your housing, that's one of the things that go with it. They give you a house, they don't give you BAH. Now, this could definitely be a great deal if you're maybe a lower rank and you don't make that much money to actually go off base and buy a home at your current BAH level. But if you're a higher rank and now you're making decent money to where as though you can either buy a house or rent something that's bigger and nicer, you're just on base and they're still taking that whole amount no matter what it is. And if you were off base, you could be potentially saving that money and using it to invest and do other things that maybe are more important to you. Now let's talk about living off base. We'll start with the pros just like the last one. So the first pro is, let's stay on the topic of BAH. So if you were to buy a home off base and your mortgage was lower than your BAH, well, then guess what? You get to keep that difference. So you can put that money in your pocket for a rainy day, or you can just go blow it. I mean, whatever floats your boat. I'm not here to judge, but that's your opportunity to do what you want with that money. The second pro is you get to choose exactly what type of home you want. If you want to be on a single family with a ton of land or a small townhome, or maybe you want a man cave or a specific open layout because you like entertaining, or maybe you just want a little rancher because the years haven't been kind on your joint. You're free to choose whichever house you want as long as you can afford it. The third pro is privacy and sense of freedom. What I mean by this is when you live on base, it kind of feels like you're never really off work. You're still always on alert. Even when you're at home relaxing, when you're off work, if you're on base, you still feel as though you gotta be looking around and making sure and be cognizant of what you're doing at all times. But when you're off base, as long as you're not breaking any laws or disturbing anyone, you can kind of live and do whatever you want. If you want to have a watch party or just day drink with some of your friends, you can do that without having to worry about prying eyes or someone telling someone what they saw. And another added bonus, if you do have friends or family that aren't prior military, you don't really have to worry about them having to get some sort of passes to come see you because you don't live on base. The fourth pro is that you get the full experience. And what I mean by that is that you actually get off base and explore Dover and its surrounding areas and everything it has to offer, or whatever base you're at, it doesn't matter. The chances are much higher if you already live off base, you'll be willing to go out there and explore and find your favorite restaurant or find a new hobby or meet new people so that you can experience different things while you're here at Dover Air Force Base. And another pro is that you'll actually familiarize yourself with the area, which kind of leads into my last pro here, which is the opportunity to build wealth. Once you familiarize yourself with the area and you feel comfortable enough, you can go out there and potentially purchase a home. And in doing so, you're going to leverage one of the best benefits that you get from being in the military, and that's the VA loan. And what that does is that you could potentially buy a home with no money down and a lower interest rate. And if you do it correctly, you may be able to find that dream home that's actually less than your BAH, and now you can pocket that money. And now the military is essentially buying you a house, an asset, and you're saving money while doing it. And then when you get that next assignment, or maybe you're potentially retiring or getting out, you can then make a decision on whether or not to sell the asset that the military has basically paid for you, and then pocket all that profit tax-free, or turn it into a rental and maybe generate some passive income and start to build that long-term generational wealth. So let's jump into the cons now. The first con is high cost. I mean, depending on if you're renting or buying and what you're trying to rent or buy or where you're trying to live, that payment could be pretty high, potentially more than your BAH, especially with all the housing shortages and just the way housing has been going up just in general in the last couple of years. So it may be a struggle to find something that fits, with within that BAH budget or that allowance. Number two is a longer drive. I mean, depending on where you want to live at and how much you want to spend, the commute could be a little bit longer if you can't find anything that's closer to the base. So that means you might have to wake up a little bit earlier, or maybe you might not be able to hit the gym in the morning like you used to when you were living on base. But in all honesty, nothing is really too far away from the base here in Dover. I mean, all of Kent County, you could probably get through the whole thing in 20 to 30 minutes. But it may be a nice thing as well if you do have a little bit of a drive. Sometimes it's nice to just decompress when you get off of work before you have to go home. The third thing is that it's just not as convenient. Also, when it comes to some of the day-to-day activities, you're gonna have to do the research about that. Is it close to the gym? Is it close to the grocery store? Is it close to the school that my kids will go to if you have kids? Or, a bunch of different other factors, but you're going to have to do that research. It's just not done for you like as if you lived on base, to where you just get in there and then you don't really have to worry about anything else. Also, you're gonna have to do a little bit more work when it comes to budgeting, because if you do live off base, you're gonna have to see what your rent is and what are the utilities. And some of those utilities you might not have on base, like, gas or water or anything like that, depending on where you choose to live. So now that you know more about living on base versus off base, hopefully you can make a more informed decision on what's best for you and your family. And if you like this video, I actually made another video talking about some of the most important things you need to know before moving here to Dover Air Force Base. And I actually made that video you can watch right here.